It's still a box seat right here also. Okay. We're fascinating Gemaras here. We're talking about the greatest people some of the greatest people in our history throughout Tanakh. To look at them, to know what is the. Sometimes it's Adam. I need your help over here because no, maybe I think I'm good. Um, the Torah sometimes, or Tanakh, or the Nevi'im, they write about certain people as if they did certain sins. And many a times they didn't do those sins that the Torah says that they did, but they either might have thought of doing the sin, or they did something else that the pasuk equates it as if they did the sin, even though they didn't do the actual sin. Good morning, Aaron.
And good morning, Rabbi Friedman.
Okay, we are on 55b4. We're moving along. The last line of the page, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Achmeni Rabbi Yonatan. Kola Omer, anybody who says, B'nei Shmuel chatu, anyone who says that the children of Shmuel sinned. As you know, Shmuel was one of the great shoftim. We just come off of Eli. The same author said about Eli, and he said about Ruvain. Right? We have Rav Shmuel ben Achmeni in the name of Rabbi Yonatan. He's the author of all those three statements. That anybody who said that Ruvain actually sinned with Bill is making a mistake. Anyone who says that Eli's sons sinned, they're making a mistake. And anybody who says that Shmuel's sons sinned, they're making a mistake. Even though the psukim, the actual verses, seem to indicate that they actually did a sin. Anna, if you don't mind, if you could clear this, make this familiar. Even though it sounds like they did a sin, but they just to get rid of the bottom, if you don't mind. Even if they actually did a sin, they didn't do the sin, but the Torah, the Psukim and Tanakh, thank you so much, writes about them as if they did the sin. So as you know, Shmuel is the one who inaugurated David HaMelech as king, Shaul HaMelech as king, and we have the Sefer Shmuel, and here about his children. And the Pasuk writes about his children that that it says, if you look at, it says they didn't follow the ways of Shmuel, and they went after prophet. They took briberies. They perverted the justice. So that sounds very right. Those words of those psukim sound terrible, right? They took bribes. They judged not properly. So that's the way it's written. But the Gemara says, but it's not so. That's not exactly what happened. But again, the pasuk is equating their actions as if they did it. And the Gemara, and what's his proof that he didn't making a mistake? Shenema, we're on 56a1. Vayehi, the pasuk says, Vayehi kasher zaken Shmuel, right? He got old, and the pasuk says children, he placed his children as shoftim. They were shoftim for the Jewish people. The pasuk says, and his children did not go bidrachav. They did not go in his ways. And then the pasuk says they went after prophets and so on, and they took briberies. So the Gemara says, they didn't follow in his ways. They weren't a tzaddik like Shmuel, but they're not that they actually you don't follow the ways of your father in a way that good morning Ralph, to keep the style, the way he did things. But the pasuk says b'drachav hu d'lahochu. They did not follow his ways. Good morning Ralph. They didn't follow the ways of the dad. But michtanami l'chatu. But it doesn't mean that they actually sinned. Meaning, if the pasuk meant literally that they actually sinned, so you don't. I would think you don't have to say they didn't follow the ways of their father. Just right, they went after profit, like the pasuk says afterwards, and they took bribery. They perverted justice. What are you going to tell me they didn't follow in the ways of their father? Just it's obvious that they didn't follow the ways of their dad. If if they did all those things, if they actually did those things, and they went after profit, it took bribery. Of course, they didn't follow their father. But what the answer is, when it says they didn't follow their father, means that their father had a unique, went out of his way. His father Shmuel he went to the people. He went from town to town, city to city, to the people to judge the cases. He didn't wait for the people to come to him. So they weren't like him in that aspect. They weren't that aspect of going to the people. They stayed home, waiting. The people had to come to them to bring, and that's what the Gemara. One opinion. Now the question is, why did they do that? So one opinion is going to say in the Gemara, because at home they were able to tend to their financial needs, what they have. If they would be traveling away from home, going from town to town, then their financial situation at home take a little would be affected, and that's what it means. They went after profit. They took bribery. Doesn't mean they went after profit and they took bribery to decide a case. But in the eyes of Hashem, that you because you wanted you because of your financial concerns, that you're worried about your money and not putting the people first, not being like your dad that put your people first, but you're concerned for your money, and that's what drove you to stay at home. So that's what the pasuk is saying. Yeah.
What it's saying is this is the reason they got to the point where they were taking bribes. Like maybe the point of saying they weren't like Shmuel because maybe it started like this, and it's teaching us you start off, skimping on money in certain ways. Next thing you know, you're taking bribes. Like
Right, right. The reason why we're not going to go that way is because, by the fact that the pasuk only says they didn't act like Shmuel, meaning they didn't act like him, is indicating they didn't act like him in his way of life, but they did not sin. Meaning,
So it doesn't say. So it says his sons did not follow in his ways. They were bent on gain. They accepted price. They subserved justice.
right. That is if you read the pasuk literally.
Yes.
Right. But how did the pasuk say they didn't go in the ways of Shmuel?
Yes.
So the Gemara is understanding that those words, that's the eye opener. When it says they didn't go in the ways of Shmuel, means they didn't live up to his level. They didn't go like him. But it doesn't mean. But the fact that if I tell you, you know what, you didn't go into you know what, you're the son of a certain great rabbi, you didn't reach his level. If I say you didn't reach his level, you didn't emulate his ways to be like, to do that extra mile. So what does that sound like? I didn't reach that level of going the extra mile, but not that I am a sinner. Not that the son didn't live up to, wasn't as great as his father. If you say someone's not as great as his father, that means that means you weren't on a totally different page. You just weren't as great as your father. Your father was this over like this, and you were like that, but not that you were like this all the way down there. But that's how the Gemara, see what the Gemara says, Bidrachav, Hudalo Ha'ocho.
But the Gemara is ignoring the second half of the pasuk.
yeah, because it starts with that. Why not end the pasuk with that? He didn't follow in his ways of his father. Like why use such harsh language?
Right.
And it's not like Reuven, where there's only
Yishkavet Shleges Aviv, right? That's right. Just doesn't have a whole sequence, but he understands the way he understands that the because he's not learning the pasuk is saying they didn't go like the dad and they did this. Not that they didn't go like that and it led eventually to that. Like Adam, that was Adam's question. Maybe it means
Yeah.
they didn't go like the dad and they and it eventually led to something. It's explaining what does it mean they didn't go after the dad. They didn't go after the dad and this is what they did. But the Gemara is saying the fact that you said the word they didn't go after the dad in his ways, and so the Gemara's understanding it means you didn't live up to the way your father conducted his level of being a judge. You didn't emulate his ways of a judge in that aspect, but not that actually you were totally a sinner. Because see, the way I want to suggest is if you're going to tell me that if it means literally that they took bribes, right now, they took bribes, they perverted justice. So what are you going to tell me? They didn't go like they didn't go in the ways of their dad. If you're going to tell them the ways of their dad means literally that they were totally different than they actually sinned. So it's obvious. Don't of course you don't tell me they didn't go in the ways of the dad. The dad was this big tzaddik, and they were doing the wrong things. So if you tell me if you tell me that they didn't go in the ways of their dad in a specific way, what way? That's what the Gemara is going to say now. Let's see if any of the commentaries say anything over here.
The first
Um,
one springs rib.
Yes.
It's like the rabbi mentioned, it says they took care of their financial business, private business. They get priority to that more than touring the land to make judgment.
Right.
But Rabbi, are there like different school of thoughts? One of them is whitewashing of Avot, and the other one is showing
What's the first thing?
the first school of thoughts. They're prophets, they're angels, they never sinned. And then the second school of thought is showing that the Avot even might have made mistake, but then they choose the proper way, and that's how they get closer to Hashem.
I mean, the first thing that you said, we never say,
Or whitewashing is maybe too harsh, but
we don't say that people never sin. Meaning, because the proof is the Gemara only listed 4 people that didn't sin, which means to say, and Avram was not part of the list, Yitzchak was not part of it, and Yaakov wasn't part of the list, and Moshe wasn't. Moshe is a machloket. So, and we say David HaMelech says he sinned. David, not that he slept with Bathsheba, but he did a sin in his life. Great people, even great people do sins. The question is, what kind of level sin would a great person is? So this Rabbi Yonatan understands that all these, in his opinion, all these great people like Ruvain, or not only Ruvain, the David HaMelech, so that we know these are great people. The question is, and he said they did not sin. Actually, with the way the pasuk refers to what they did. I mean, the pasuk says about them they did a certain thing, and it's not it doesn't mean to be taken literally. Just like eye for an eye doesn't mean to be taken literally. It means the value of an eye for an eye. Or I like to use. I think the better example I gave is that it says the Torah says these are the children of Moshe and Aaron. And who does it list? Whose children do they list? Aaron's children. So how could you call them children? These are the children of Moshe and Aaron, and you call Aaron's children Moshe's children.
But that's creates an ambiguity because elsewhere in the Torah it establishes that it's not their children. So now we have a contradiction.
Right. So how do you explain that? How do you explain it?
But that's different than a situation where when the Gemara comes to resolve a contradiction in the written Torah, that's different than when the Gemara itself directly contradicts the written Torah. And so I thought that the Geonim generation was more like, like you can't contradict it necessarily, and so they didn't accept all of the, Gemara.
I mean, the Gonim have to accept the Gemara. You know what I'm saying? They have because the Gonim came after the Gemara, and they all follow the Gemara. The only question is, do they follow a certain approach that's found in the Gemara? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Nobody. What do we have regarding Ruvain? I mean, even regarding David HaMelech, nobody. Okay, we'll see. We're going to see more of the people as we see. We're going to see Shlomo HaMelech. We're going to see there's a lot of people that the Torah wrote things about, and but again, like I'm saying, the question is, is there a distinction between the story of Moshe Rabbeinu? But I'm using that as an example. And listen, we had the Gemara about the tzaddikim who Hashem originally said they should live, and then Hashem says that changes that no, they should die because they should have protested against, and therefore they are considered as if they sinned. So we have this concept on record that if a person does not stop someone from sin, it's as if you did the sin. You're going to be punished for the sin. So that concept is a Torah concept. Meaning a person could be held responsible for something that he didn't do. And it's in God's book, it's as if he did it, because he should have protested. So God has a different book. So you could write about somebody they did something they didn't do. We had the Mishnah, even the Mishnah. The cow of Elizabeth and Isaiah went out on Shabbat with a string, with some sort of strap between its horns. And the Gemara says that didn't happen. His cow didn't go out. We find even in the Mishnah, which is not, the Mishnah is much later and usually talks more in a regular language. Meaning to say, I think it's very uncommon to take a language of a Mishnah and say it doesn't mean literally. I mean, it doesn't mean literally, it says a story and says, no, it doesn't mean it. But yet the Mishnah actually says, the Mishnah writes something that the cow of Elizabeth and Isaiah went on a Shabbat with a ritzua with a strap between its horns. And the Gemara says it never happened. Didn't happen. But because he didn't protest when his neighbor went out, so we could write about it as if his cow went out that way. So once we see that the precedents are there. So now it's not a big deal to say that the Torah writes talks that way too.
Right. But the question is, how do we know when?
Right? So right. So that I presume different people have from traditions from their rabbis, right? The question is, really, you need someone, the earlier rabbis, to give you the interpretation. You see, I like to say, when we learn a pasuk in the Torah, right? We need to understand how the rabbis, the Chachamim, the Gaonim, the Rishonim, how did they explain the pasuk? Now they based it on whatever and he maybe perhaps Rabbi Yonatan, he understands that he's digging a little deeper into the pasuk. He's not looking at the pasuk at face value only. He's saying, but there's a word in the pasuk which he understands is like the key that sheds a light on what's going on in the pasuk. He's understanding now that by the fact that it says it did not go in the ways of his father. That's like you didn't go in the ways you didn't the style of the way you acted as a judge. You had a different style. You didn't do it his way. It seems to indicate that they actually didn't sin. They didn't sin. It was just that they didn't reach certain levels. I see other commentaries discuss, where does he see in the pasuk? Is it the way we saying, because it says the word bidrachav, his father's ways. He didn't act he didn't live up to his father's ways, but it didn't sin. If you say someone didn't live up to their father's level, some want to say that they bring from the Ion Yaakov. He wants to say that the fact that the pasuk says uvanav, he said, let's see, if you look at the language of the pasuk, it says uvanav lahochu banav bidrachav. It seems to be an extra word. He wants to say there's an extra word of banav because the previous, the pasukim were talking about the children of Eli. He's placed the children of Eli as shoftim Yisrael. So it could have said v'lo hochul b'drachav. Why does it say banav? The word banav seems to be extra. So Ian Yaakov wants to say, if that word is indicating is that they were his sons, and since they were sons, they really did not sin, except they did not live up to the level that their father was on. So whether this, how to interpret this pasuk. So it seems that that's how he's understanding these words of the verse, like which would be these words, which would be superfluous. If you want to learn his way, it seems extra. If you're gonna say literally they did not act, they didn't go like their father and they sinned. So it's obviously they didn't go like their father. If it means they sinned.
But maybe to not, go in your father's, just maybe what it means is like, like if you're making cottage, right? You do it exactly like how your father did. Like you cut the bread exactly like your father did. That's going in his ways. But if you don't do that, that's not a sin. But it seems like it starts off, I'll just judge differently than my dad. I'm just a different type of judge, but I'm not a sinner either. And then the order of the pasuk is it starts with that, and then it's now you look for.
Yeah, but the same pasuk, but you could also learn the pasuk that the end of the verse is describing, because it seems like it's a run-on. They did not go in the ways of their dad, and they went after this thing. So it sounds like they're directly connected. Meaning this is meaning not that this led to that this is description. They didn't you could read the verse this way. They didn't go after there's an and in the verse. Look how it said. They didn't go after the ways of their father, and this is what they did. Not that they didn't go after the ways of their father, which led to another thing. Rather, this is the description. This is the description connected to what they didn't go after the ways of their dad.
Right.
And why is that the description? Because they didn't go from city to city. They were going after the money. That's the description, how they weren't like their father. Their father didn't worry about his financials back home. But these boys, they worried about, therefore they weren't like their father to go from city to city. Rather, they stayed home because they wanted to have money to have more money. Let's see what the Gemara language is.
And also that after that pasuk, it says that's the reason Bnei Israel asked for a king to be replaced, to have a king.
To replace. But but they really should. We say they should not need a king because they have to Hashem directly. So that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara is the question. What does it mean? They went after the prophets. The Gemara says they didn't act like their dad. Shehoya Shmuel HaTzadik. Shmuel HaTzadik mechazeh b'chol makomot Yisrael. He would go in all places, Ralph, right? He went all over Israel. V'donotom b'oreim, and he would judge them in their cities. Shenema, as the Pasuk says, v'holach midei shana b'shana, every year he went with Savav Beitel, Gilgal, Mizpah. He went all over. V'shafat Israel. V'heimel also came. The sons of Shmuel, did not do like that. What did they do? Eliyahu b'oreim. They stayed in their cities. Kedei, and in order, and they judged, Kedei laharbot sachal chazaneim usafrehem, to increase, to bring extra money for the people who worked for them. The people who worked for them, that they had now you had to hire the members of the court to tell the people that they have to come to court. When the court comes to you, it's much less expenses of notifying the people. The language of the Gemara, the language of the Gemara, and also Sofreim, you have to pay the scribes that would have to write different documents. The language of the Gemara seems a little bit different than the language of Rashi. I mean, Rashi, the language of the Gemara seems like, I won't say Rashi, but it says what was for, they wanted to increase money for their chazanehem. They wanted to increase money for their, but not that they were looking for their own money, right? Yes.
He'll look at the judgment you want, right?
Right.
Don't pick people who are like driven to money.
Right.
Like this guy seems like these sons seem like eventually, like why wouldn't they come to pervert justice? And it's like, next to Gemara says, David Amelech, he never sinned. But then there's another Gemara that says he's a rapist.
I don't think rapist would not be to me to be literally. We have to see that Gemara because obviously David is not a rapist. David is again he would be referred to that only because on his level what he did we could equate it as if he did that sin, but he didn't. Meaning again, it says David HaMelech at the Torah. She was a divorced woman. He didn't sleep with a married woman, but.
No, but he wasn't guilty of.
He wasn't guilty of adultery.
But she couldn't say no. That's what the Gemara says. That's not what I'm saying.
No, but even if he did say no, again, whatever the story was, she was. They used to give the bill of divorce before they went to war.
Right.
So therefore, her husband already had divorced his wife.
And he sentenced wrong.
And he also again.
No, but that doesn't give.
But we're going to see. He said the front line, but also he had whatever it is because. Because he went against Malchut, because Uriah rebelled, said, whatever, we'll see what his sin was.
But what gives him the right to send his people to grab, a single woman and say, I'm here to pick you up on behalf of the king? If Kim Jong-un did that in Korea, there would be no way to say no. And that's what the Gemara says. That's what makes it coerced.
Okay, so we'll have to see more.
Okay.
Well, Ralph, you wanna, you'll